Hey, you're listening to Sam and Em Solve the World's Problems. We have so many problems, but today we're going to be talking about some big ones, like how to choose the right career or life path in general. We're also going to be talking about feminism, and we definitely could not have chosen a better guest for this. She's studied law, she's a singer-songwriter, she wrote, created and starred in her own cabaret show about feminism, and now she even runs a feminist podcast. It's going to be a great chat today, and we can't wait to share this conversation with the amazingly talented and always wonderful Mim Sarre. Hey Mim, how are you?
Hello! Hi friends!
Hi, it's so good to have you on the podcast. So excited to have you here. Let's get to know you a little bit better for our audience.
Oh, alrighty.
When did you think we first met?
I have photos of the three of us at reunions, so church camps and stuff, from the early 2000s, I reckon. But the first time I remember properly meeting you guys is probably around 2010-ish, I reckon.
Yeah, probably. Because I think,
I'm sure that we've all been around each other's lives for forever.
Yeah. Because all of our parents are friends. My dad is buds with both of your sets of parents.
Yeah, I remember you singing as a child. If I was 5 years old, I remember you performing and singing, and I even remember then that you had an amazing singing voice. Which probably, leads into now. You've been training that for 20 years since?
How old am I? 26? Yeah, about 20 years. That's a really long time.
So since then, you have not only become an excellent singer, you've written cabaret shows.
You're a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You're a lawyer.
Yeah, sometimes.
Pretty sure you're fluent in French also.
You kind of sound almost like the perfect strong female lead in a romantic comedy at this point.
So for the listeners, I know that you can't see what I'm
wearing.
Oh my god,
I didn't notice that.
I'm literally wearing a jumper that says in hot pink letters, strong female lead.
I did not see that until after I said that. I just want to point that out.
Your brand completely, I think.
Oh, it's my brand.
Yeah.
I like to think it's more than a branding thing. I like to think it's, how I live my life. But also I think my branding is pretty strong to just who I am as a person. So,
But yeah, you're from South Australia, Mim, right?
I sure am. Currently in the beautiful city of Adelaide, which is Ghana country. I really love Adelaide. Currently we're COVID free. So, it's a good place in Australia to be right now. Also good to not get complacent though. But yeah, South Australia has been a lovely place to grow up because it's, it's the festival state. That's what it says on our license plates, SA, the festival state. And
I've literally never heard of a South Australian festival. What do you mean it's the festival state?
Really?
we have so many festivals.
Adelaide Fringe?
Music. Oh yeah, okay. I was gonna say cheese festivals.
Yeah.
What are we talking here? What kind of level of
More
festival?
Cultural festivals that are Adelaide specific. So I guess music festivals and stuff can tour and things, but the big ones are the Adelaide Fringe, the Adelaide Festival, WOMAD, the Cabaret Festival. But we've got so many others as well. Pretty much every month of the year, there's a festival happening in Adelaide. So as somebody who is very arts oriented, it's a really good place to get your start in your own community when there are so many festivals to that are there to support your work, which is really cool.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're arts oriented. I guess that's probably been nurtured heavily growing up, right? And I just kind of want to get an idea of your passions and where you found your passions and how you've, I guess, gone down certain paths, because you've gone down quite a few.
Yeah, I have.
You have literally got a law degree. You're fluent in French. And then, I mean this in the best way possible. You've put your law degree to the side and are now focusing on the cabaret show that you wrote and your podcast and everything. How do you put a degree like that aside to follow your passions? It would have been so much hard work. How does the decision to put that to the side come about?
Pretty much, I learnt last year through a lot of soul searching sounds douchey, but basically I saw Brene Brown in Melbourne last year with my mum, and she challenged everyone to like pick like 2 key core values that they live their life by. And I antagonized over it. I probably cared about it more than I should have, but I was, because there are a lot of various passions that I live my life by and things that I care about. So dwindling it down to 2 was impossible. But basically, I got it down to the fact that I think that the 2 core values that are most important to me are justice and creativity. And so I think that when I was going down the legal pathway, I was like, yes, this appeals to my strong sense of justice, my strong sense of like fairness and equality. And, you know, if you forge a career pathway in the legal system, like you have an opportunity to make change and to be able to, you know, in some small way, bring about justice in your community or in your wider circles. And I think that was all well and good, but I was really ignoring the fact that I have this really strong creative streak. And if I am ignoring that and just focusing on one thing, then it's not good for me. Like I don't thrive when I am in an environment that's really, really structured and really going by the book. And I mean, yeah, there are opportunities for creativity in the law, like, you know, in the writing elements and in, you know, the way that you're going to forge a creative argument based on the case scenario that you're given. But for me, I really need to be creative in my songwriting and in my performing. And so the way that I see how I choose to use my legal education now is that I take my strong understanding of the legal system and I take my strong understanding of law and justice and how that can be really deeply flawed in our society, and I put that to use in my creative practice. So I write songs about that, I write theatre works, I write cabaret about that, I make podcasts about that, and so I think I still see my legal education as having been really integral to how I'm forging a path in this, you know, feminist cabaret niche that I have found myself in. But yeah, I think it's just using it in a different way.
Like a foundation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that, I'm probably picking out a weird part of all the things that you just said. But you mentioned that you chose to pick 2 values and go from there. Is there any reason why it's 2 values or?
So it was, that's what Brene Brown, who is this like amazing speaker, I think she's maybe like an HR specialist kind of, but she's a bit of a, you know, pop culture phenomena. That was just what she challenged her audience to do. And I think that it comes down to 2 because if you get a choice of too many, then you're like, oh, but all of these things are important to me. And then it's hard to live your life by your core values when you have so many. So like really whittling it down to 2, I think just really makes it clear to you what your highest priorities are. And like I antagonized over it for a long time because I was like, oh, but I really care about like compassion and humility, and I care about family, and I care about you know, all of these other words that were on the list. You were given this like massive thing of like values, and like 90% of them I circled, and I was like, yes, I care about that. But then I was like, well, I think the reason that I care about like compassion, for example, is because, you know, I think it's the right thing to do to be kind to other people and treat other people with compassion and take that on as a stance. Like, and that kind of fell under my justice umbrella. So yeah, I think the idea of whittling it down to 2 just makes very clear to you what your priorities and values are. It's a really great exercise. I would recommend it to everyone, but also you'll antagonize over it and it will.
I wonder if we could. So you said that there was
until you figured it out.
You picked from a list of values.
Yeah, I'm sure that if you look up Brene Brown, it's probably a resource that she has on her website. But I mean, honestly, if you just like Google like list of core values, that you probably get something like that. So yeah, I'd recommend it because it gave me a lot of insight into my choices and a lot of things that I had done were like put in a new light, and I was like, oh, it makes sense that I wanted to do this, but that this didn't work for me. Like, it makes sense that I wanted to be a lawyer, but it also makes sense that it didn't work for me because my creativity couldn't flourish.
On that, we have a fan question this week from Caitlin Harder.
That's so exciting.
She would like to know how you knew when you wanted to change your career and what gave you the courage to do so.
I guess not necessarily that you change your career, but I guess a lot of people would do a law degree and go, okay, I want to find...
Like, I have to use this. Yeah. How did you have the courage to recognise that it wasn't for you and that path wasn't where you should go?
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess... It wasn't so much a career path change as it was like the pathway that I had been on kind of took a sharp turn in a different direction. I think that at the start of 2019, it's a bit silly. I don't know what it's like in the rest of Australia, but I'm confident that it's quite similar. In South Australia, when you finish your undergrad Bachelor of Laws, you're not actually qualified to practice as a lawyer yet, which is rude. There's one university in South Australia that does the practical component of it over the course of the undergrad, but at the two other universities, like, you finish your undergrad and then you actually have to get a further qualification to be admitted to practice, which means that you're actually allowed to be a practicing lawyer. And a component of that second qualification is that you have to do 6 weeks of like full-time placement as like in a firm, or in my case it was in the public system, because I was doing criminal law at the Department of Public Prosecution, which is like the government agency that prosecutes criminal matters. And so I did my placement there, and as much as like on an intellectual level it really stimulated me, and I was like, criminal law is really fascinating, and also like the system is a bit fucked. At the same time, the Adelaide Fringe was happening. And I was like, I felt like I was living this double life of like, during the day I would be at this office and I would like be dressing up and pretending to be a lawyer in these clothes that I was like, this is not me. I am not the sort of person that wears like pencil skirts and sensible pants and collared shirts. Like, who is this woman looking back at me in the mirror? But like, I would do that during the day, and then at night I would go to the Adelaide Fringe, which is like the height of the artistic year in Adelaide, and go and witness all this incredible artistry that was on display. And it was just it was so clear to me that is where I was my true self, and that was where I felt the most like that was my community, and like felt that was most in line with what I actually cared about. And so the distinction was really clear, and that was what that was probably the first catalyst. So I think to the dear question asker, Caitlin, hi Caitlin, I think it's about knowing where you feel most yourself and where you feel like I think this is a big one, where you feel like your skills and talents and passions are best utilized. Because I think that, there are so many law graduates that come out of South Australia alone. Like, I think I graduated with like a couple of hundred people, and I'm like from one of the 3 universities that offer a law degree in South Australia. Like the job market is so saturated with law graduates, and like so few jobs, especially now in COVID. Like, no one is hiring. So I suppose I kind of took a step back and I went, there are so many people that could do the legal thing that aren't me. Like, if I don't do this job, somebody else is going to do it for me. Like, someone, I'm so replaceable. Whereas I feel that in my artistic practice, I feel like I have much more of a unique voice. And I think that, not to say that, my perspective is one that no one's ever heard before, because like, you know, oh, a white straight woman cares about feminism. Like, that's not unique in terms of the perspectives that we hear, but in terms of, you know, what I can bring, like my the fact that I am a songwriter, and the fact that I have a lot to say about feminism, and the fact that I have you know, the capacity to produce my own work at an artistic level. I think that I looked at both pathways and I went, anyone could do the legal side of things. There are so many people that can be a junior lawyer. I think that I have something unique to bring as an artist. I think that I'm going to serve my community better by creating artistic work that makes accessible the social issues that I care about, more so than I am going to be like one tiny, tiny cog in the great grand scheme of things that is the justice system, trying to make a difference there.
Yeah, I think it's very admirable that you come at it from a place of how can I best serve my community? And also, I guess, how can I best serve kind of my needs as well? What I got from that answer is that it's very much about how can I best contribute, like what can I best offer? And I think that's a really good way to find what it is you should be doing. And you've done that, and you've written an entire cabaret show, and I flew to Adelaide to see the show. And
because you're the best.
No, but I went to do that to support you. And then when I saw it, I remember sitting in the audience and going into it, I think I viewed feminism as something that, okay, yeah, it's about equality. I can definitely get on board with this, but I would never have gone amongst my friends and proudly said that I was a feminist. Not in a million years. But I remember going in, seeing this show that you created, and it was so talented. Like, you are so talented. You so articulately were able to, I guess, display what feminism means to you and why it's important. And I remember at the end of the show being like, everyone needs to see this, because my perspective was changed in that I was like, I am absolutely a feminist after watching this.
That's amazing.
Having unfortunately not had the chance yet to see your beautiful show, I've listened to the soundtrack, but haven't had a chance to actually see it. I'm curious to know, like, what your thoughts about the show were when you were creating it, and like how much did you think about, I want to change people's minds, I have to frame it in a certain way, or just like what that sort of process was like for you?
Sure. I mean, it definitely evolved. What I was trying to do with it definitely evolved, like, over the writing process and the process of its conception, and even like as I was performing it for the first time, like in the first season, it was the audience response that I was getting. I think that it achieved some things that I hadn't quite imagined that it would, or hadn't quite been brave enough to admit that I wanted it to, if that makes sense. I think I had wanted to write it for a really long time because I really liked cabaret as a medium, and have had some really wonderful opportunities to like perform cabaret and be mentored like in a much smaller setting, like, 15-minute sets here and there. And I wanted to write a cabaret show about feminism because I was like, this is the thing that I really care about. This is the thing that I have a lot to say about. And I was very inspired actually by my friend Josh Belperio, who I am very lucky to write a lot of music with, in that he had written a full-length cabaret show, like 100% his own original songs, that was like the story of him almost dying because he had a bike accident and he had a injured spleen and he had to have all these surgeries, and like he made this like very funny show about his near-death experience, but also like very like heartwarming and quite emotional as well. But he really opened my eyes to the fact that cabaret could be like a vehicle for like original songwriting and activism. And I guess I wanted to write a cabaret show about feminism because it's what I knew and it was what I cared about. And I think my aim for it was definitely to attract people that wouldn't have otherwise given feminism the time of day to the concepts. The show is called Friendly Feminism for the Mild-Mannered. It was meant to be like a bit of a hit back at people who are like, oh, these angry feminists, like, oh, I don't want to listen to them because they're just going to yell at me, which, is problematic in itself. But the fact that there are some people that aren't going to engage with a topic unless it's delivered in a gentle, friendly way. And so literally my aim for it was just to get people on board that might have otherwise put up their walls if they were presented with what they perceive to be angry feminism. But also to get people who were like maybe like a bit on the fence, or like you, Sam, like somebody who's like, yeah, I guess feminism's a good idea, but not really understanding its full scope or full importance, I guess.
I guess it's really easy to come from that perspective. Well, I think a lot of people were like me beforehand, probably still are, because it's hard as a white man to see that women aren't equal sometimes. I was completely blind to it. Like there's certain things that people point out, you're like, yeah, okay, but it's like when I talk to Emily sometimes, like in a previous episode, I recommended going on late night walks, and she's like, no, I can't do that.
You mentioned it to me like 2 weeks earlier that you did it, and I was like, yeah, no, that's not something that I can do. That's not something that we can do.
Or like sometimes I just don't think that like, you know, like getting the train late at night from the city.
We've had other discussions where it's been like, he's like, why can't you just get the train home from my house at like 10 o'clock at night? I'm like, because I can't do that. I have to drive. I will not get public transport after it gets dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, just that fear being there, that's not equal. I don't have that fear just because, like, you know, why would I?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sharing your own experience and speaking your own, like giving a testimony of what your lived experience is like probably one of the most powerful forms of activism, I think, because I think you can talk about things in, in the hypothetical, and you can talk about things in like these broad sweeping strokes where you're like, oh yes, this inequality exists. But unless you actually listen to somebody that has a lived experience of it, it doesn't quite click. So, I think that was definitely one of the reasons that I especially put something into the show that was a very personal experience for me to kind of drive home that fact.
I was actually going to ask you about that because you do get quite vulnerable and share like a personal experience in this show about feminism. And I wanted to ask how that impacted you, sharing that with people. How did you decide to put that in the show? Like, was it a hard thing to do? And once you did it, how did it impact you? And did you get any people sharing how it impacted them?
It was when I was sort of creating the arc of the show, that was sort of where all roads led to. Like I had to talk about sexual assault because that's where most feminist issues lead. Like that's what the conversation about consent is about. Like that's what the conversation about rape culture is about. That's sort of, you can even like draw links between like toxic masculinity as well, which is also in the show. And especially as a white, straight, upper middle class woman who doesn't experience any other injustice in her life, to make it very clear that this is something that is basically, I can only speak to my experience. And I suppose that I knew it was an issue that had to be touched on, and I knew that it was an issue that in order to pack the biggest emotional punch and make the strongest statement about it, had to come from a place of experience. So in the show, basically, I shared a pretty detailed account through song to, soften the blow slightly. Maybe it makes it more emotional, but it's easier for me to sing than say, I guess, about an experience of sexual assault that I had. And writing the song was very cathartic. And then sharing the song with audiences for the first time was terrifying. But I definitely have heard from audiences that that's probably the moment that brings home the message the most, that this is why we need feminism, because this is a very real way that it's impacting most women and non-men. And I have been very privileged to have a lot of people actually share with me their experiences as well, and have been empowered to share those experiences with me because I have done that on stage. So yeah, I do very much stand by the fact that I think that definitely not just in my practice, but in all forms of activism, that sharing your own story and sharing specific ways and specific examples of how, discrimination of any kind has affected someone personally is one of the most powerful forms of activism, I think.
I struggle to have conversations with my male friends about feminism because they they either switch off just because of feminism, the title of feminism, like that just has its connotations, and they switch off, or they, like, as you said, I can only speak from my own experience. And so when I talk about feminism, for me personally, it's coming from the place of, like, I don't feel safe to go on walks at night. And I, I've had experiences where, like, I've been groped on the side of the road, like random stuff like that. I can only speak from those experiences. And every time I've tried to, like, have a conversation about feminism, they, like, bring it back to, like, the pay gap and stuff that, like, in my society and in me trying to talk to them about my experiences isn't necessarily relevant. And I just, I would love to know from you, like, how can you have a conversation but with someone who I know is a feminist, I know believes in everything that feminism is, but refuses to accept the label, or the word feminism turns them off from even hearing about my experience? Like, how do you have that sort of a conversation?
Yeah, that's really tricky, and I don't think there's a hard and fast answer. I think that in regards to the label, I get that it probably has some negative connotations to some people. And I think that, ultimately the goal of feminism is gender equality. And I think that there's this misconception that feminism means that it's about women overtaking men and taking over the world and, being put above men ultimately, whereas, truly it's just about achieving equality ultimately. And the reason that it is still called feminism and not gender equality is just a nod to its roots, and the fact that to, shed the label of feminism and say, okay, anything around the issues of, patriarchy or gender equality or the experiences of women and non-men is now just referred to as gender equality, is doing a disservice to the generations before us, like the first and the second wave feminists who, fought for women to be able to vote and rights in the workplace and a right to work. So it's just about the fact that, we need to recognize where we've come from in order to recognize how it applies to modern day. And so I guess that's the way that I frame, at least, the reason that we should still call it feminism, is the fact that it's just a continuation of the work that previous generations of feminists have done, and it's fighting against the same system, and it's coming up against the same roadblocks. Like, it's the same fight, just new shit, different decade. That's my argument, at least, for calling it feminism rather than gender equality. But I suppose with regards to tackling issues with people that potentially are otherwise put off, I suppose that it's one of those things that if you can bring it up contextually, it can be helpful. Like, if you bring it up rather than being like, we're going to have a conversation about feminism now, just like if something comes up naturally in conversation where there's some level of gender inequality that is ingrained in that conversation, to chat about it without like chucking a label of feminism on it, or just going, oh yeah, like there's this system in place, like or I'm not sure, I think I'm speaking too hypothetically, but I guess like if somebody brought up the fact that like, oh yeah, I can't take the train home tonight because I, as a woman by myself, I'm not safe on public transport after dark. If that then turns into a broader conversation, being able to talk about that without labeling it as feminism might be helpful first off. Yeah.
I was going to just quickly ask, is if you can have a conversation with someone and both speak freely and, have a very open-minded conversation about feminism without ever saying the word feminism, if they agree with all of the things that are mentioned in that topic, but then still won't call themselves a feminist, is that still enough, or does the label mean anything, I guess?
I mean, if you're living your life like aligned with feminist values, I think that's better. I think somebody that lives their life striving for gender equality and caring about issues that relate to women and non-men, and they don't call themselves a feminist, I think that's better than somebody who does call themselves a feminist and then doesn't live up to the label. Yeah, I think pretending to be a feminist is worse than actually being a feminist and not calling yourself one. Yeah, the label is a funny thing. Like, there are, like, apparently Dolly Parton doesn't call herself a feminist, whereas, like, a lot of what she does is very much around, like, the empowerment of women and gender equality. So I think you should only use a label if it is helpful to you. And I think for feminists, it's like just knowing that you found that people that have similar worldviews for you and have similar priorities and care about the same things. But you can know that somebody cares about the same things as you without having to attach a label to it. Yeah, I think that there is this stigma around the idea of feminism, and debunking that is going to, lead to more gender equality, just like stop making feminism scary, I guess. And I think that potentially you're still clinging to that if you're somebody who refuses to use that label.
Honestly, I think, like, as someone who has had that barrier knocked over, like the whole feminist thing, I could not recommend watching your show more. I definitely think we're going to leave a link to Friendly Feminism in our show notes, because I think you did such a good job of, like, so Emily, like, you're talking about sharing your experiences about, not necessarily feeling safe at night and those kinds of thing. I don't want to talk about it from my perspective, but I think that what your show did so great, Mim, was it talked about all of those little things. It built up to that, and then you knocked it home with your experience, and it was like my opinion, my fortress of my opinions was just shattered, kind of thing. So I think you did such a great job of putting all those pieces together and then bringing it home with, I think, sharing your vulnerability like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very impactful as a viewer, and particularly as someone who knows you well as well. I don't know, I felt awful. Like, in the best kind of way. Like, hearing that experience had happened to you was, yeah. So I could not recommend watching this show anymore. It's such a great show. Mim is so talented, and please watch it, especially if you're on the verge of, if you're not sure whether to call yourself a feminist, I think.
Something else, like another way that I think that you can approach feminism with men is the fact that it literally is about gender equality. So there are, in fact, ways that feminism is beneficial to men. And, that shouldn't have to be a draw card. Like, you shouldn't have to be like, hey, you're going to get a slice of this as well. But it's a way to, introduce them into the conversation, because the system that we're trying to dismantle is one that also negatively impacts men. Like, the system of patriarchy and the system of traditional gender norms and gender roles is really like puts a lot of undue pressure on men as well. That's where toxic masculinity comes from. That's where the expectation that that men are not emotionally vulnerable and men aren't emotionally expressive, and that there are certain things that men can and can't do, comes from. Like, patriarchy and toxic masculinity will have you believe that anything that is remotely feminine is not a way that a man can express himself. Oh, sorry, I should say perceived to be feminine is not a way that a man can express himself. Like, he can't participate in activities that might be perceived to be feminine, or act or dress or think in a way that could be perceived to be feminine. And that's that weighs on people. And there's a lot of studies that demonstrate that the fact that we socialize men to not express their vulnerable emotions, and this starts from a really young age, it starts from young boys, because men and boys are conditioned to not cry, to not be emotionally vulnerable, to not express their innermost feelings, that leads to a lot more mental health issues amongst men in our population. And that's something that feminism is working to dismantle. It's not just about women.
Do you want to talk about her other creative endeavors as well before we get to the problem? Or because you also have a feminism podcast.
I do. I freaking love podcasts.
Can you tell us the name of the podcast and why it's called this? Because it's interesting to me, the name of it, considering...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the show is called Feminism Ruins Everything.
Yeah.
And it's combative. It's meant to be like, oh my God, what? These people are slandering the good name of feminism? But no, the idea is that every week we take a movie or a musical, or some sort of other pop culture phenomena, and we give a feminist critique to it. And a lot of the time, oh my God, the episode that is coming out this week, we have absolutely trashed The Greatest Showman from a feminist perspective. So basically it's like, the idea of feminism ruining stuff is like, if you give a feminist critique to like beloved movies and musicals, it will ruin it. But, yeah, it's great. We ruin your favorite things. No, sometimes we actually are very positive. But yeah, I think part of the reason that we tried to make this quite like boisterous title, maybe it was a bit facetious, I don't know, was so that people would see it and it would be eye-opening to be like, hang on, wait, are you saying that feminism is great, or are you... Yeah. It's memorable, I guess. But our tagline is, it's a feminist podcast, so that no one gets confused. Like, if you were coming to this, know that you're going to experience a lot of pro-feminism discourse. Yeah.
From a male perspective, I've been trying not to butt in on this conversation too much because obviously, but from a, like, I guess asking for all the men, what can we do in the fight for feminism? That might be a very large, broad question, but I think it needs to be asked.
It is, but it's an important one. I suppose listening to women is important.
Any other suggestions?
Yeah, I think that the more that you listen and empathize with the experiences of people that aren't men, I'm trying to use gender-inclusive language to include non-binary people as well, the more empathetic you're going to be to their experience. And, if you're somebody that's like, oh, I get that women feel vulnerable, at nighttime, I am going to make an active choice to, like, keep my distance from you so that you know that I'm not threatening. I think the biggest thing that you can do is call out other men. Because if somebody is a man who is perpetuating patriarchy and who is perpetuating, speaking about women in like a hypersexualized way, or, being disrespectful to women in any way, the classic locker room talk, thanks Trump, I guess the biggest thing that you can do is call them out on it, because if somebody is already harbors sexist views, they're not going to listen to women about it because they're going to disregard those experiences. But if it's another man calling them out, that is when they are going to respect that, because they're inherently going to respect men more if they're looking at the world from a sexist viewpoint. So I think calling out other men on their sexist actions and words, and doing that, especially when women aren't around, then I think that's the biggest thing that you can do, honestly.
I think that's the hardest time too that you can.
Yeah, well, that's the thing right now.
It's definitely not easy.
All of us trying to be allies and anti-racist right now, like pushing for that kind of sentiment is. It's the conversations behind closed doors with your family and friends that matter the most. That's where we can help the most. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because it's not enough to just be somebody that advocates for gender equality when women are around. It's not just enough to be somebody that is that advocates for racial equality when non-white people are in the room. Like it matters when it's just men, when it's just white people, what we talk about and how we shape the worldviews of people that belong to the privileged groups, because it's the people with privilege that actually make the difference, because we have the most influence, because that's the way the system works. So we've got to harness our privilege for better, to dismantle it.
Very wise words. I'll do my best.
I have a problem.
Yeah, let's get into the problem
I
solving.
have a problem. I'm a hot mess.
Same.
So I one of the songs that I wrote in isolation, because I wrote a lot of songs in isolation, just so that I didn't go insane. One of the songs I wrote was autobiographical in nature, and the song is called Messy Bitch. Because somehow, like, I'm not naturally an organized person, but somehow I have managed to overcome that in my adulthood, in that I'm, like, very good at, like, organizing, like, external events in my life. Like, my diary is, like, to the T, like, so organized, like, pretty good with my time management, but I just am such a mess. Like, if you were to take a tour around the part of my house in which I live, it's a disaster. So I'm not quite sure how to not do that. How do I not be a messy bitch?
I'm the
I was
worst
just
person
like-
to ask.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, oh my God, I'm so organized. And then you were like, mess as in a physical thing in your house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, my room is a straight up disaster.
Oh, man.
I'm
I
trying to blame it on the fact that I'm
Okay.
moving, but that's not the case. It's always like that.
Yeah. When people refer to me as organized, I'm like, wow, I've got you fooled.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
I don't know
just
many
makes sense.
people who are genuinely excellent at living this way.
Also, I feel like it's a product of, I mean, normally in my everyday life, my mess and my clothes being everywhere all the time is a product of the fact that I'm never home to deal with it. Like, I get home late from work at like midnight, then I have to wake up for the uni the next day. Like, putting clothes on hangers and back in my wardrobe is not a priority. Getting the fuck to sleep is my priority. So, but now I'm like, I still don't know what my issue is because it's still not clean and I haven't left my house in 3 months. So,
Okay, but back to the problem at hand of being a messy bitch. As you said,
Yeah, no, my own words. They're my own words. I own them.
I guess,
is there a genuine solution for this kind of a problem?
I don't know.
Is it like a personality thing?
I think it's a prioritization thing. This is something that I do not find requires a priority.
You are much cleaner than I am.
Are you serious?
Yes.
You have not seen my room.
Not recently, no, but I have been in there before in my life and it's never been messy, just like on a random day.
Literally right now, it is. You probably couldn't see the floor. It is. I have to say, I hate living like this. I think every week I will clean it up perfectly, but then there'll be one shirt or something that makes it to the floor, and then it explodes.
That's
Yeah.
my thing. My
It's that's
issue
the
is
gateway
like,
shirt.
you know,
Yeah.
when like you wear something and it's like doesn't need to be washed just yet, but you're not. I don't want to put it in my cupboard because it's on the dirtier side, but it's not ready to be washed. So I put it on the floor, and then I accrue a pile of it, and
It's a
then I
catalyst.
just end up washing them all anyway because it's a pile on the floor, and I don't remember what's clean and what's dirty.
Like, and the thing is that genuinely tidy people would be like, it's so easy, just do it. And I'm like, no, it does not come naturally to me. The person that we need to hear from is somebody who's like a recovering messy bitch, like somebody who has actually overcome it.
If anybody is listening to this and has any tips for us, please like DM us, like put them in the comments, let us know, help us, because this is not one that
We will
can solve,
talk about
I
it
think.
in a future episode for sure, because all three of us, we are not the people to give advice on this topic.
I'm getting better. Okay, my thing is like I'm getting better in like a household sense. Like I've recently become the kind of person who like I get very uncomfortable when the kitchen is messy. And I like once stayed up till like midnight cleaning my kitchen just because I just was like, I feel like I can't go to bed while it's messy. And I just like different household things I have become quite.
Yeah, but like how often? Because I leave stuff places and my family hates me for it. I always leave my protein shaker in the bathroom. Always.
What's it doing in the bathroom?
Well, I come home from the gym and then I want to get straight in the shower. So like I'll make a protein shake and I'll go into the bathroom. Why is it weird?
Just wait the
Have you never
5
had a-
minutes. No.
You never had a drink in
I
the
don't
shower?
want to
Have you ever had
all food into the bathroom.
Have you
with
ever had
germs.
Hold on a minute. Have you ever had a shower beer?
In the shower.
I don't drink it in the shower. I often like chug it as I'm going to the bathroom and I just leave it there. But like, okay, but that's the thing. So I leave things everywhere and my family hates me for it. And I try to like contain the mess to just my room, but it's never the problem is time. Like I'll be like, I'm gonna go back and get that later. But by the time that I've done that, people have seen it, and then
Yeah.
I mean, it contributes to the mess. So
I don't think we
I
should solve
apologise
that problem.
to people who are...
It's all right. I think it's going to be an ongoing problem through most of my life. It has been for the past 26 years, so don't see why it won't continue to be.
It's just like so much easier to just put everything on the floor instead of putting it away. I know it takes like
half
0.5 more seconds to just put it on the hanger, but like it's too much.
Why is that, hey? Oh, man, problems. We really need to get a therapist on this podcast.
We really do. But
That'd
then
be
I'm
great.
scared of what would
I'd
happen
listen.
if we did.
Would listen out of 10.
Yeah.
What would they diagnose me with?
Yeah, I'd be a blubbering mess by the end of it.
Yeah. Should we do recommendations and goals?
I'm going to straight up start this recommendation. Have a beer in the shower if you like beer, or have a cold drink. It's like being on holidays. It's the best. Have a shower drink. Okay?
Okay.
You're not going to do it, are you?
No.
Shower wine,
I just don't know that that's...
I feel like people are going to be like, no, glass in the shower. But
Oh, yeah, that's a safety hazard.
Doesn't it get water in it?
no, it's so good. Like, you're like under like this steamy shower and you have like a sip of it, like an ice cold refreshing beverage.
I get it in the bath.
Best.
I just don't get it in the shower. I'll be too scared of it, like getting shampoo. I don't know.
See, having wine in the bath is like normalized.
Yeah, because it's not going to get dripped in.
You're not, like, there's a confined
Yeah,
space that water
true.
comes down from the nozzle.
And also, like, a bath you associate more with, like, being a relaxing thing, whereas shower is more like a functional thing. Like, I need to actually clean my body, you know?
Yeah, as someone...
It's like I feel like I'd be wasting water if I stopped to have a drink in the shower.
It's still so much less water than you'd waste in a bath.
Yeah, but if you spend an hour in a bath, you're using way less water than if you spend an hour in the shower.
Yeah, true, but I'm not spending an hour. It's only one beer, and you don't have to drink the whole thing in the shower. Point is, it's just a recommendation, all right? Take it or leave it.
Take it with a grain of salt.
How about you guys?
A podcast I've been really enjoying is called Big Sister Hotline, and it is hosted by Clementine Ford, who I know for listeners who are like, not sure about feminism, might be turned off by that, but I love her. And she like has a really cool guest on every week, and they listeners actually kind of similar to this, except more like kind of Dolly Doctor-esque. Listeners send in a problem, but it's usually more about like sex, relationships, etc. And the guest and Clem like give them advice on the problem together, and it's called Big Sister Hotline, and it's really wholesome and I really like it. So that's a podcast I've been enjoying. Also listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when you said there's a podcast, I was like, oh, here we go, another plug. No.
I might follow on a similar line because I can't think of a recommendation, and like every essence of my being is a recommendation for this podcast basically at all times, because I don't think I've plugged it yet. But my favorite podcast of all time, Shameless, it's great. I don't know how.
I've heard of it.
It's so good. They basically like go through pop culture stories in the news cycle. They talk about like, they do like 3 main segments and then like a little, they call it the quick and dirty, and they just do 5 headlines from the week, and like they just dissect different things. So like I don't know how to describe it. It's just the best. They advertise it as being for smart women who love dumb stuff. And I think a lot of my feminist knowledge has come from the discussions that come as a result of different pop culture stories. And they do an in-conversation episode, and they do interviews, and they've just started a book club, and like, I don't know, I love them so much. I listen to like every week without fail. I'm going to end up recommending them all the time, but that's for the first time I've properly recommended them.
Yeah, and I can vouch for the fact that you recommend them all the time, and I still haven't listened.
I've listened to your favourite podcast.
That's true. I should listen to it.
You should.
That's my
I'll
goal.
find a good episode and I'll
That's
send
my
it to
goal
you.
for the week.
Okay. Listen to a Shameless.
Shower beers and Shameless. Maybe I'll do it all at once.
Can I do a backwards goal? Like, can I do a goal that was from last week that I have accomplished?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I got my
So
first
many
ever
wins.
blood test by myself. And by first ever, I meant I had to get 2 in the last 2 weeks. I used to be so scared of blood tests that I made Mum get numbness patches, and we would go get them put on 30 minutes before I got the blood test, and then I would come back and get the blood test. And I did 2 blood tests in the last 2 weeks by myself. I'm so proud of myself.
Emily Judd, you're a queen.
So that's my, like, backwards anti-goal. Anti? No, just backwards goal.
It's not a backwards goal. It's a goal you achieved.
It's a goal that I achieved that I haven't had spoken about yet. But yeah, very
Yeah,
proud.
that's awesome.
Still don't have any results, but like
you.
I got the blood test and I'm proud of that.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I had surgery about a month and a half ago to get my tonsils out. As a whole saga. There's a whole episode in that. Just advice to any listeners, if you're going to get your tonsils out, just know that you don't have to take all of the pain medication that they give you, and you can be like, nah, I'm just good with Panadol, so that you don't go into like a mental health spiral because you're on 7 different types of painkillers. Hot take. Don't take all the painkillers they give you. That was a real diversion. But since I've had surgery, I have not been exercising because I felt like crap, and then I, got out of my habit. So yesterday I went to my first yoga class since I had surgery, and I got this like $50 1 month unlimited, as many yoga classes as you like pass. And so I just am going to make the most of my $50 and get as many yoga classes as I can. So I'm going to make a goal that I'm going to go to yoga like 4 times this week. Big goal. But but I want to start getting into a good exercise pattern again, because honestly, exercise is the best thing I can do for my mental health. So
I could see the look in your eyes as you were saying a number, and I could see the number decrease as you're like, oh, they're going to call me back.
We have talked about exercise at least every single episode so far. It's been someone's goal, usually one of us. I also have not exercised in like a month because the reason that I've been getting blood tests is because I'm really breathless all the time, and I can't do the exercise without needing in my inhaler, so I just haven't been able to do it recently. So I feel that.
Yeah,
I'm proud of you for getting back into it.
I'm skipping arm day for this, so just letting you know.
Oh.
Yeah, there's the eye roll.
Your gym's
I make sacrifices for this podcast. That's all I wanted to say.
I will fight you.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I love you a lot for so many reasons.
I love you guys so much.
You're so talented.
Do you want to do a quick little plug of all of the places people can find you right now?
I'm pretty active on the Instagram. My handle is @Millicent Sarre, so just my full name smushed together. And on Facebook, my artist page is Millicent Sarre as well, also my name. And my website is millicentsarre.com, which is where you can buy my music and the album that has the songs from Feminism on it. And you can find my podcast. It's called Feminism Ruins Everything. So that'll be on, Apple Podcasts, iTunes. iTunes is the same thing. Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, basically. And our Instagram handle is @Feminism Ruins Everything Pod. Yes. And we also have a Facebook page as well for Feminism Ruins Everything. Yes. We're all over the socials.
We'll have it all linked down in the show notes, but also now I won't forget anything because you've said it all out loud. So that's great.
Amazing.
So thanks again so much, Mim, for joining us.
Thank you so much
It's
for
been
joining.
so lovely to talk to you.
It has been my absolute pleasure. Thank you for hanging out with me.
Thank you.
Yay, love you guys.
If you enjoyed today's episode of Sam and Em Solve the World's Problems, please subscribe, give us a great review, and follow us on Instagram @SamandEmHaveProblems. And you can support us on Patreon via the link in the show notes.
The music is by The Vinyl Press, and you can check them out on all the good streaming apps or find them on Instagram @The Vinyl Press.
Also, send us your problems. We'd love to help.